G'day, Matty. How are you, mate? Not too bad. Thank you so much for joining the next step today and coming to share a bit of your story. I want to hear a lot about your story, actually. So I just would love to get into the deep, dark parts of Matt and why I hear such wonderful things about you out in the community, mate, and find out what I can learn from you and hopefully what our followers can learn from you as well, and what that driving message is that we're always going back to is for you.
Yeah, thanks so much. That's actually really, really kind of. Firstly, I feel really privileged and honoured to be invited even to be on here and amongst these guys. I've seen some of the talks and the presentations that you guys have done and some of the other guests. Yeah, and you've got a big following, so for you to reach out was very kind. Yeah, look, I'm based down south of Adelaide. I live in Aldinga Beach with my wife and my daughter, and I've got a number of different roles in the community now. I guess when you talk about the deep, dark parts of Matt Newlands, there's plenty of those, and I think as with everyone's got a story, really, don't they? But I've found a way in which I can sort of open up on that story, and the intention behind that over the last few years is learning ways in which I might be able to support others who might avoid going through a similar sort of path that I've gone through in the past. So yeah, so I guess the bit of background. I was served with the South Australia Police for 10 years, based down southern suburbs mostly. I went up to Port Augusta for a little bit as well, which was interesting in the early stages of my career. But I wanted to be a cop since I was 4.
Sure. Okay.
So, which I think a lot of young kids, they sort of align to those roles. But yeah, I wanted to be a cop since I was quite young. Got into the police, served in the police for 10 years. Got out in quite dramatic circumstances, which we'll talk a little bit more about soon. And then spent from probably 2016 through to, well, even now, just focusing on how I can get myself well. I'll talk a bit more about the mental health diagnosis and the challenges, but the first priority was just getting myself well. Yeah. And then I realised that there was probably lots of other people who were going through similar sort of stuff, especially in the emergency services space, but more broadly just in the community, especially as a man in the community. And now I found myself at 31 years old out of the police and in a really, really dark way, and had to start getting better. Now we fast forward a few years and yeah, I have got lots of different roles. So I run my own business. So I do speaking engagements, talking around mindset, leadership, resilience, overcoming adversity. I also do some consulting work in that space too, looking at supporting organisations to develop a strong workplace culture around peer support and what that could look like. And then I also am a qualified and registered counsellor as well. So I do counselling with a focus on the military and emergency services space, but still, I don't discriminate. If someone wants to chat, I'm happy to chat. So I do that. And then I've also got a day job. I work for Military and Emergency Services Health Australia. I work there as the stakeholder engagement manager and the program manager. So there's a number of programs that we deliver to support frontline military and emergency services members. And that's really, really purpose work for me as well. And then I've also got a number of volunteer roles as well in the community. So I'm a national community ambassador for Are You OK? So I do a number of different things with them, mostly organisational presentations, but been fortunate to be involved in a few of their other campaigns. I also work as a trainer, if you like, for a men's health initiative called the Male Hug. They've got a national hotline, 1-800-BUDDY, and it's operating at the that connection end of the spectrum, non-crisis. But there's about 20 different guys around the country who are prepared to just have a chat on the phone. My role there is to make sure that they feel confident to have those conversations with people. And then I am also a board member for for an organisation here as well, which is in the mental health space.
Okay.
So, I think that ticks off all of the things at the moment.
Unreal, mate.
Yeah, so there's a few roles.
Yeah, I'm sure you're drawing from a lot of lived experience and everything else, but obviously the study in there too. You've got the lived, you've got the research or that study, and you're building this huge platform and spreading it across all these different wings, I guess, in society and in our community. So that's massive, mate. Well done.
Thanks.
Massive credit to you. So let's go back to, you just mentioned 2016. Getting discharged from the police, I'm assuming. So tell us a bit about that, or maybe even, do you want to go a bit before that, and then what led us up to 2016 and what that time of your life was like?
Probably makes sense to go back a bit. Like I said before, wanting to join the cops since I was 4 years old. I've actually got this photograph of a family friend who came to my 4th birthday, and he was in the job, so he came in uniform in the car, and there's a picture of him holding me in front of the staged photo, and apparently, like, I don't remember obviously, but apparently that was the time that I started to say I want to do that when I'm older. Did all, I guess, schooling. Then once I got to high school, was geared around what would it take to get into the police. So I was very aware. I was very engaged with police recruiting around year 10, year 11. And then when I got out of school, I ended up moving to New South Wales for a short period of time. I actually applied for the New South Wales Police. Didn't pursue that because I didn't necessarily think that I would stay there for very long. And as it turned out, I returned to Adelaide when I was 19, 20. And then one of the first things I did when I got back was applied for the police and got in. So I started at the academy when I was 20. I had my 21st birthday while I was at the police academy. So you can imagine it was actually a pretty tame 21st, because the amount of exams and assessments and stuff during that time, it was an intense period. But mate, I loved it. I did 9 months at the academy, I guess training to become a cop. I didn't miss a day of my training. I was one of the youngest of the course. I graduated the course as the recipient of the leadership award as well, which I was like, this is crazy. I just didn't. Yeah, I think I felt as if I was where I needed to be. And even when I was there, it just took it so seriously. Everything needed to be done perfectly. I wanted to be the best I possibly could, and that. I think when, we'll talk a bit more about the identity piece that's wrapped up in this as well, but that I think is the framework. That's the foundation of wanting to be in the job and then joining the job at such a young age. It's a real formative time in anyone's life, particularly in a man's life, around who they're going to be and what they're going to be. And often who they are is defined by what they are, or at least this perception of what they think they are. So for me, joining the police that's who I was going to be. I was, and I still say now, like, I'm sure my blood's blue, like, even though I'm out of the job, but it made up such an important part of who I was. I think the disconnect that occurred in those formative parts of my career, though, was around believing that because I joined the police, they gave me all of these values and instilled all this identity into me, when it was actually quite the opposite. I brought that to the police. That's what made me good at the job.
So they were already there. It just probably was like a sense of an increased capacity because it had purpose now.
Absolutely.
You had something to apply it to.
Yeah. And I think the values of these, like, of service organisations, when we start talking about courage, respect, integrity, excellence, service, like these type of value expectations, that was just like throwing fertilizer on me, basically. And I just kept growing and growing.
Found your space to grow. Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%. And loved it. And so I finished up the academy in November of 2006. And finishing as the senior course at the academy, I was one of the course captains. I got the leadership award, all this sort of bullshit that goes with it,
high achieving stuff.
Yeah, that's right. And then on the Thursday, I started at Sturt Police Station, and none of it meant anything.
So, you're back to being a rookie,
man. And I remember someone, I think it might have even been one of the instructors, said, you guys need to really realise that once you're out of here, you're considered like lower than the police dogs. And you know what? That's pretty fair, because the police dogs are hard workers. So there's actually so much loyalty in them, and they're hard workers. So then it was just this constant. I think the academy process was really around trying to. I wouldn't say that it breaks you down as a person. It just challenges who you are and sets a very high benchmark as to who you're going to be. Yep. And you don't get your warrant card or your badge at graduation and go, like you swear an oath, and it's not like you get to do this stuff Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. It is like you have become this thing. Yeah. And that's where I think it is all consuming. And it's not just the police. There's lots of roles in the community where even if there's not necessarily like a legislative expectation, but people do tie up so much of their role as to who they are. Yeah. So they are that thing all of the time. And that can be quite dangerous.
There you are doing your 9 to 5, and instead of, I guess, in a roundabout way, I think a lot of males, we find it hard to switch off and then become dad or boyfriend or whatever that looks like in anyone's dynamic. you're just programmed 100%. I was going to say 110. We can't do more than 100, can we, mate? But just 100%. Your mind's on the job the whole time.
All the time. And just like I said, whilst in the police and maybe in military emergency service roles more broadly, but I think, like I said, there's other spaces in the community where people feel that expectation, you know. And once you get known to be that thing, I'm sure as much as you know, I go to a party and people go like, oh, you know, this is Matt, he's a cop. You know, there's all of a sudden there's an identity piece just constantly being acknowledged.
This is your sense of identity.
Absolutely.
Matt the copper.
Matt the copper.
He's Matt the cop. Nothing else but Matt the cop.
Yep. And to be honest, Richard, I was actually okay with that because that's what I wanted.
You loved it. Yeah.
That's what I wanted. Yep. And I think as well, when joining roles or joining jobs like that or forming identity, there is very much like this self-centered approach. Like Alira and I were we were, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend in a relationship at that time. But other than that, you know, marriage is something completely different. You know, having children, very different again. And so I think the balance is okay to, in that space, to be sat at, I'm 100% a police officer. And if I have some other time and a few moments spare in my day, I'll be something else, and I'll be a partner or a friend or whatever. But
that's second too.
It's second too. And it's a distant second too.
Yeah.
You know, it's a really long way back. So that was kind of the forming up of my time at the academy, and I loved it. I made some great friends there. Still like in contact with a few of the guys that I met at the academy as well, and then went to Sturt. I was at Sturt for about 6 months, and all of a sudden it was no longer just a game. It was no longer just, you know, if things went south, you could just end exercise. It was real. And being 21 years old, and if I show you photos of how young I looked then, I wouldn't take me seriously. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be coming into people's homes and trying to restore order in some way and giving advice on how people should be behaving. I was like, man, I'd barely lived a life myself.
Who's this young bloke telling us what to do?
Yeah. Why would I listen to you? Like, what do you know about life? So you find yourself giving marriage advice or something. You're like,
you should have seen me at the academy. I won all these things. I've done the hard work. You need to listen to me.
Have you asked my mum? You know, she's my biggest fan.
Yep.
So that was a massive learning curve. But again, I enjoyed that. I had some really good people that I worked with then as well, senior coppers that I worked with. And they set a high expectation, a high benchmark, but they were very supportive, and that was exactly what I needed. Even to the point where I think, you know, a few of the guys were like, "We're going to this job. You don't say anything. You just stand and watch me do what I do." And thankfully, you know, they were really experienced, really good coppers. I was quite happy to do that. I just took instructions. I just wanted to learn. I just wanted to be the best that I possibly could in those spaces. I don't, even now, you know, if I stuff up, I don't take that well. You know, very much a perfectionist, but I think that served me well, especially in the early stages, because I threw everything of myself at that role. After about 6 months, I got sent to Port Augusta, so I worked up there for just on 2 years. And again, very different dynamic, working in a like a bit more of a regional area.
I was going to say different community space than looking at Marion, Sturt, around that area, than going out, let's say north and
absolutely
being rural. Yep.
And smaller community as well, I think, impacts that. So you can kind of be bit of a, I was going to say a grey man, but almost like a blue man when you're in uniform in like a metropolitan area. You know, and you go to a fight at a hotel, you're just another uniform, you know, whereas if you go to a hotel in a smaller community, and Port Augusta's not, you know, it's not this like tiny township, there's still a few people around, but very quickly people get to know who you are. You have to police in a different way. And so I think that was a good thing for me, because it helped me get better at my communication. So no longer was I just able to, I guess, just assert authority just by presence or because of the uniform and the badge, but I had to now actually connect with people.
Yeah.
And that was a skill set to be learned.
Because I guess in a roundabout way, you're in a smaller community, so you're Matt the cop at the pub trying to sort out an indifference, but tomorrow you're Matt at the supermarket buying bread, and that person's standing next to you going, "Hey."
And exactly to that point, I remember working one day where I was working on my own, and I had picked up this dude down on the foreshore. He had a warrant. It was all fine. It's all no dramas. But we go back to the station. We process him there. And back when this was like 2007-ish, when I was at Port Augusta. Even the court stuff, there wasn't really court security. So I was then supporting this guy while he was, you know, back of court. Court ended up releasing him on bail. So that was kind of my shift. And then I finished, and then sure enough, I'm walking down Main Street to go get dinner, finished at 3:00, thought I'll duck to Woolies before I go home. Old mate's sitting in the street. And so now I'm, Matt, the off-duty cop, and we're just having this dialogue in the street now, completely different role. So if I was a dick to him and he wants to then be cranky with me, then now it's a completely different dynamic. So I think just that awareness then thought, what, I've got to be a bit more aware of who I am and the impact that I'm having on other people's lives as well. So so that was an interesting time. Made some great friends again up in Port Augusta. Loved my time, and then at the end of the 2 years, I came back to Christie's, and I worked at Christie's Beach for about 5.5 years.
So at Christie's, is this now where things started taking a turn for you, mate? Or tell us a bit about that, because everything so far sounding good, isn't it? Really good. Yeah. Sounds really good, and I can see, the pride in your job role, the purpose it's given you. You're being distinguished as this, person in society with some importance, and I can see it's all working really well so far.
Yeah, that's right.
But then something's happened. Something's happened, because that's why I'm sitting here, mate.
Exactly right. And people are like, "All right, cool story, bro." Like, so you've been a cop, whatever.
That's some really important background, I think, too, because it builds a story that everything's going swimmingly, so to speak.
And I think that's an important point. Yes, you're right. So everything feels good. Even come back to Christie's, that feels good. I did some further study. I focused on learning some leadership roles as well within the police. I found myself in fortunate positions where I was able to then lead small teams for extended periods, and I loved it. Leadership for me is about being of service, and that connects back in with just the role in itself. So I did some qualifications. I got myself studied up and found myself in some really cool, jobs. And again, feeding that identity piece. I'm very good at this job, and we don't do it for accolades and stuff, but it felt good to feel like it was all making sense. Life made sense, and at that point, I had this whole trajectory mapped out. I knew that I would be. The intention was to be sergeant by 30. Senior constable by 30, sergeant by sort of 35, senior sergeant by 40. That gave me sort of 20 years roughly to work through the commissioned rank. And I thought, if I can retire as a commander of an LSA, like maybe looking after an area like Christie's Beach, mate, that's me. And then I'll be a retired cop, and I'll sit on, do retired cop things, whatever. Well,
it makes sense, the motivation's there, the goals are planned, we're working towards something, I'm sure with a bit of flexibility. I'm not like, if I'm not senior by this time of my life, then it's all been wasted. But, so you had these stringent goals that you're working towards, and, probably creating a bit of anxiety as you're getting up to those things. Because like I said to myself, I'm going to be at this point, so I've got to work harder. And, I noted that before. You did draw comparison to being a perfectionist. Yeah. So, you've got all these things. I can see you mapping things out step by step in your life. Probably not just work life, but in your personal life too. And you're striving for these things, and we're moving forward to these things. So everything's got, I'm going to say, pressure in a roundabout way, because it's pressure put on there by yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's useful if it's used appropriately. And I think one of the points there when you said about even like personal life, you're right. During that time, I'm married and now have a daughter. And so there's competing pressures. Again, we go back to that as to, well, if I have to, it's not just me that signs up to the police, it's my whole family. Yeah. So my wife and daughter now come along for the ride, and they didn't necessarily choose it as such. All of us, this was a passion of mine, and they supported me in that. And obviously then, you bring a child in, and doesn't really get to choose which dad she gets, No. So there's those competing pressures too. And so all of my focus is still on policing, because I can justify that by saying, well, this policing career provides, me status and opportunity and money and all these things in the community, which then allows to pay for mortgage and cars and set up a life, all that sort of stuff. So there's this constant flow of pressure, and just trying to, there's a trade-off for everything. So if I'm sat here now with you, the trade-off is it's Sunday morning, and we could be sat as a family having breakfast. Mm-hmm. Now, that is something that we consider as a family to go, is it all right if we do this stuff? And we've had those conversations beforehand. So it's not lost on anybody in the room as to we're all here, there's a trade-off. We could be elsewhere. It's the same thing in the police, but the trade-off is 100%. It's always the police first. The 10 years that I was in, I think I worked probably 8 or 9 Christmases, for example. Never asked for one off. Just didn't even think about it. Wow. The job needs me. Is this type of approach? Fully committed. The challenge was in 2012, and I think I'll add this bit in as well, because again, it shows how much of a love this thing is. It was actually on my birthday. I got a phone call to say that I was accepted onto the sergeant course. So I had done my exam. I'd passed the exam. You get one crack at it each year to do an exam. You have to get your, certain percentage on your exam, and then you get put into a course the following year. I'm sure it was 2012. And I got that phone call on my birthday, and I remember I was at work and I was out in the courtyard, and I was on the phone to, I phoned Alira straight after, and I was in tears of happiness, of joy, of pride, of like all these big emotional responses, because I got on the sergeant course. And there's probably emergency services guys and coppers in particular that might be listening to this and going, man, what an idiot.
Or they could be like, I feel
that was
him,
me.
that was me too.
Exactly. Yeah, they could.
But I guess in a roundabout way, and I'm going to use the word validation, it's validating everything you're striving for, isn't it? Because it's giving credit back to the hard work you're doing. And when we're getting validated and giving credit, it almost gives that another sense of that next gear of motivation. It's like, keep driving, keep forcing, keep pushing. I'm on the right path. It's everything happening here is happening for a reason. It's been validated all the way. And this is Matt.
It has to be me.
How big can I get, so to speak?
Absolutely. It has to be me. Like I'm on the right path, and validation is a really critical thing, because I use that even now to help guide, to steer my life and check in. But so that was all going well. The roles that I did in the police were all frontline. I liked just being in the community. I also liked the reasons why police were required, and that's in essence to restore order in many ways, and protect life, prevent serious injury, and all those type of things. And so for me, it was always about these frontline roles. I would work on what they call uniform tactical teams. They're a bit more of just a proactive response. So they'll be doing, we were doing, let's say, walkthroughs of hotels and stuff just to ensure order. We would be there as additional resources to general patrols. If jobs kind of went sideways, we'd be able to support them in those roles. But just, I guess, generally speaking, we were trying to find people who didn't want to be found, and those in the community that were, causing trouble, we would focus our energy on them. So a lot of those roles that I did some plainclothes work with, like the criminal investigation branch or CIB, and just house break-ins and car thefts and all this sort of stuff. And that was my thing, chasing bad guys, so to speak. Loved it. I just loved the intensity, loved the fast-paced nature of it. And when we were talking before, like with other Rich, about just some of that, the intensity of that hypervigilance that comes with it, of this constantly being up in a geared up stage, ready to go. I just like being there. It felt good, to be that ready.
It's almost like a mindset that you, like you said, you work yourself up into, you're geared, you're at probably optimum level. Everything's firing, isn't it? So the sensors are going full on. You feel like you're probably more switched on, alert. The adrenaline's pumping, and it's just like, you're good to go. This is like, in a roundabout way, that flight or fight response.
Absolutely.
Fight response
all the time,
and peaking.
All the time. Because in those roles, the brain will still go into that stage of fight, flight, freeze. But in these roles, there is no opportunity to freeze, and you sure as hell can't run away, because if the cops don't do it, then who does? So you're constantly conditioning yourself to fight all the time and to lean in. And I enjoyed that. I like that. But, you can start to get a bit of an idea as to the impact that can have on someone.
I was going to ask you, and, here you are trying to stay in, we'll say, that fight response, because that's what the job is asking for. But is that what Matt is about? Is Matt a fighter?
So I think in that time, very much Matt the fighter. Like, I enjoyed being there. I just liked leaning into a lot of that stuff. And I think sometimes when I'm talking to other guys, but especially those in emergency services, there can often be a guilt or a sense of shame of the enjoyment of the level of violence that's required to meet the need to get the job done. But
Yeah.
but I enjoyed it.
Man, it drives that ego, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
You go, man, I
Absolutely.
feel like a man now.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and
yeah.
there's that validation again.
Yeah,
You know?
because it also, I guess, validates as well your ability to be able to not only protect yourself, but protect the ones you love and care about too. So, and I think there's that piece that comes into it, which again feeds that esteem. And especially as even now as a man, like that, I feel that sense of responsibility is my role in the community to still protect others, especially my family, especially myself. So I think there's that validation too. Challenge is though, and we did talk about this before, is that when we talk about a lot of the critical incidents or the traumatic events that occur in people's lives, more often than not, in my experience anyway, not just mine personal, but those around me that I talk to, it's not so much the traumatic events that are the catalyst for struggle and challenge. It's a lot of the stress that goes around that stuff. It's a lot of I guess what could be perceived as like, say, a moral injury. I'm not able to maybe bring that person back to life. I'm not able to stop that person from being a victim because it's already occurred and we can't get back in time. So then there's this challenge now of, am I actually making the difference that I initially set out to achieve? And so a lot of that starts to just slowly chip away. And then when I found that I started to maybe lose control or lose a sense of myself, because to join the job was to be of service to the community. And then after a period of probably 7 years or so, it now start to get into the space. And, often it felt like, today's victim is tomorrow's offender type approach, or you're going back to the same jobs, dealing with the same people. You don't see a majority of the community. And I then did start to wonder, what is the point of all of this? And
because you're focused on a niche almost,
absolutely,
aren't you? You're not seeing the beauty of everything else around in the community, but you're really focused in on this part of the community that you're not necessarily part of because there's issues there.
Yeah. So there's so much of Matt Newlands that joins the police. There's all these other roles and labels. And then the deeper and further into the tunnel of like that role that I went, things had to make way. So all of a sudden I stopped getting invited to like catch up with friends because usually I wasn't available. And there's only so many invites that one gets before, on a Saturday night for dinner before they go, well, there's probably no point calling Matt because he'll be working anyway. So that disappears. And then, even some of the family commitments, you're not around. Alira will talk as well and about when people would invite us to events and she'll go, I don't know about Matt, but I'll be there. And so you're missing engagement parties and weddings and birthdays and then even like a lot of the smaller stuff, like just barbecues on weekends. Like you're just not there. And if you are there, you have to start work at 3:00. So you're not exactly having a beer or anything, and then you're back in the car and cutting away early. So
you're not present. You're thinking about your next shift.
Exactly
you're
right.
Thinking about what's going to happen or what time you've got to get out of there to get ready for work. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so you couple all these things, living in this like constant state of hypervigilance, losing all this other sense of role and identity outside of other than I am just a cop and that's what I do. And then starting to go, am I even really making a difference in doing this job? I feel like I'm just a consequence to people's poor choices or poor behaviors. Like that's it. And I remember even when I was in a dark time, I remember even saying that. I feel as though I am the darkness. I am the thing that turns up when other people's life is just turned to shit, then I'm the guy that appears. If you think that if some tragedy occurs in your life, usually the police will turn up. If you have a horrific car accident, or even if it's just a minor one, cops turn up. If you end up getting yourself in a bit of trouble at a pub one night and security, a bit too pissy and the security kick you out, cops turn up. We don't get invited when you're having a baby shower. You don't go, hey, we should call the cops and let them you come in and a few high fives. Like that shit doesn't happen. You put all these things together and all of a sudden it becomes a melting pot of, well, like I'm now at that point in time, 29, 30 years old, starting to probably, I've got mortgages, I've got cars, I've got responsibilities, I've got a young family, I've got all these things, but I can't really be present for those because I'm sacrificing all of it for this role and identity that I'm now starting to lose connection with. It's a really dangerous place to be in. And then, and then in 2013, a friend and colleague, he took his own life. And I was on duty. He was off duty. I saw him only a few hours before. And that was, I guess, a really significant incident, as you could imagine. But then I even lessened the size of what that experience was for me, because I could always justify it with, well, he had closer friends. He had better mates. He had, and then there was also that other piece of, I remember going to the house and Ambos were there and, we had a few of my team were there as well. And there's like, there's nothing you can do. and it was so different, as I'm sure you can imagine, to all of the other suicides that I had attended, because now there was this real close personal connection. I knew the person. Not only did I know the person on the ground, but I knew the people who had found him. I knew the people who were then sort of turning up. I knew the people that would have an impact. Like, I was one of the people that would have this significant impact. And I'm sure as this conversation goes on, we'll talk about, the impact of suicide in the community. But, I was that, but I had I had a job to do first and foremost. There was no time, for grief and loss and trying to get my head around what was actually occurring in this moment. There is a requirement, and to do certain things, to do certain tasks, to get certain things underway. And I think in that moment I connected with my ability to do those things well would mean that this whole situation would be resolved as well as it could be. So providing I didn't sort of like mess anything up, then I wouldn't make this awfully tragic situation worse. Which is then I put a huge amount of responsibility on myself in that moment too. And I remember saying because obviously a few others had turned up to this guy's house, and I'd had to, they obviously knew what was going on then when they saw the police and the ambulance, and just the somber state of affairs at that time. There was an expectation that I had it under control. I was, it's all right, Matt's there. We don't have to worry about anything. That was what I was trying to portray.
Yeah, because you're trying to put on this, I don't want to use the word brave face, but I'm
That's
sure
it.
Matt's putting on the brave face.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, we can use that word.
Yeah.
But then Matt's also got to still be this ideological thing that he's created, like, because there's still work to do. Isn't there? There's still work to do. There's still purpose. Matt's still got to do Matt and still keep the station or whatever going. This is an unfortunate circumstance, but in a roundabout way, do you know what? Maybe I can process that later.
Exactly right, 100%. And I know even back then, my awareness and understanding of like my own mental health, the mental health of others, was really poor. And I think even like then I didn't know how bad it was until like I look back on reflection and go, I had no idea really.
I was going to say, but you didn't know.
I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know.
A wise friend once told me,
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know.
And there's so much truth in that though, isn't there?
Yeah.
There is so much truth in that. And unless, and I guess I'd say to the listeners of this, the fact that they're here and they're listening to this is them trying to learn. And, and that should be commended. It's about then going, well, how is it that I can find out more? And you don't have to have the answers. That's not what we're saying here. This is about, and this, I don't have the answers now either. Part of this and sitting down with you this is an opportunity for me to learn more too. Like that's all that I'm constantly seeking out is ways in which I can learn from others, develop new strategies, new coping mechanisms, whatever it may be, learn just new knowledge about this space. How can I do better? Not just for me, but how can I do better for others?
Others, yeah. No, lovely.
So that was a big incident.
Yeah, huge, mate. Yeah.
The way I dealt with that was copious amounts of alcohol.
Really?
Just drank a lot. And I think that was a real catalyst in that moment, but then also following that, it started a very rapid downward spiral around my own mental well-being. I struggled to sleep over the following sort of 18 months, and we'll get to the big blow up of the career in a moment, but I really struggled to sleep. I would rely heavily on alcohol.
So this is all starting to stem from your mate's passing.
Yeah. I think that was basically like I think that was probably like the volcano explosion. Sure. And I will never, ever say that, his decisions and his choices in that moment have, therefore, like he's responsible for that. Absolutely not. I'm responsible for me and myself and the way I respond and deal with other circumstances. Yeah. But I think for me, that was just like the volcano moment of all this other stuff that was starting to sort of bubble away. And then this happened and I really started to like struggle with what is the point of all of this? If this is how this basically ends, then why am I pushing so hard for this?
You're starting to question everything now.
Absolutely.
And you're probably not just questioning that moment, but your whole career /
my whole life. My whole identity.
Your whole identity.
Because I'm a cop. And if I'm questioning being a cop, then I'm questioning Matt Newlands.
I just got goosebumps.
Yeah.
I literally got goosebumps. Yeah.
And I still do even when I think about it, because I wasn't anything else is the way that I looked about the perspective I had of my life. And and I'm sure that there's many roles in the community we've spoken about where people feel that, men in particular feel that, like, I am this thing, I've done this thing for many years, and all of my friendship circles have refined and defined around this thing, and whatever it may be. And if you start to question that thing, like, you are now questioning who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Which is massive.
And not jumping too far forward, but now probably hence why Matt questions and looks for knowledge and literacy in everything that he does, you know?
Yep. So, yeah, so that was quite an intense experience.
Yep.
So following that, I did what I could do well, and that was go back to work and police. And then it made sense. When I put the uniform on, when I had those roles, when I had that responsibility, it made sense.
Yeah.
Yep. Purpose is back. And
that's routinal too, isn't it? Because that's the identity coming out. Bang. This is what I do every day.
There's structure.
This is my safe space. This is what I know. This is where nothing goes wrong. This is Matt being Matt.
Absolutely. I know what I do, and by that stage, I'm quite experienced, to some extent in that. So I feel confident and competent in that role, which is really important for people to have. And so I kept going back. But it's really difficult to heal when you keep going back to the same environment that is causing the challenge and causing the trauma. It's like, trying to operate on someone post car accident, but they keep trying to get back in the car and go like, nah, operate on me in here. And you're like, well, that's foolish. And I think that's a piece that's regularly missed. But in the same way, I also recognize that we don't always want to just get people out of work either. And there's often a tendency, if people are feeling unwell, to take time away from work. Work could actually be the place that they draw comfort and solace and friendship and led by the individual, I think, Rich, is the point. What does the person feel like they need? Yeah. Is this serving you right now? Like, there's a lot of those questions around, are you in the right place that you need to be?
Well, look, I think for us now, sitting where we sit, let's say we were having this conversation 15, even 20 years ago, we wouldn't have known.
No.
But now I'd say having time off, yeah, sure. Yeah. As long as there's a safe plan or some sort of support or some sort of conversation evolved around what that looks like.
Absolutely.
Especially if we know that person's struggling.
Yeah.
However, if there is no support and we don't know that person's struggling and they just go have time off, well, we know how severe the outcome of that could or may well be.
Absolutely. Yeah. That sense of isolation. And especially when you're in a space of like questioning your identity, isolation is, we're aware that, there are three contributing factors to like risk of suicide: feeling as though you're a burden on others, isolation, and then having the means to do so. Yep. And so when I start thinking about me in that moment, and I started to question that, the feeling of like, if I'm not this, then what am I? That's a burden on others, because there's a big expectation, not only on like, say, my family, but my wider community of me doing this role. So if I I did start to isolate myself. I didn't want to show up anywhere else in life, because policing made sense. Outside of the police, I didn't know who I was. I was really challenged by just being out of uniform, just really challenged by it. Didn't know where I fit at home. Didn't really know where I fit in my like community. I didn't feel like I had any friends, because by that stage, when you're not on duty, you're hanging out with other coppers. So like, that's just how it works.
Or the wife, or Alira and Grace, or whatever it might be. But probably not being present as well.
No, you just want to go back. I just want to go back because it makes sense when I'm back there. Yeah. So really dangerous, difficult 18 months from 2013 right through to 2015, beginning of. And this is where it all starts to really unravel, is the beginning of 2015.
Yeah, everything you've just spoken on just screams depression.
Absolutely. And for those that are like, aware of signs and symptoms and stuff, we're talking about, significant impact or impairment on your life for an extended period of time. That's exactly where I was. And I was in low mood all the time. And it makes sense when you think about this state of hypervigilance, it goes up into this really elevated state. So you're ready for anything, that fight, flight, freeze response. And like we spoke about before, constantly conditioned to fight. So then when I came home, often home is a sense of like sanctuary and safety. So you come home and you let your guard down. And naturally, there's an equal and opposite reaction to that state of hypervigilance. You found myself in this really dark, low space whenever I was home. So then for those that have very poor mental health literacy, start to challenge, maybe it's not the job, maybe it's everything else. Maybe the job is the only thing that's going well in my life, because I feel good when I'm there, but I don't feel good when I'm anywhere else. So maybe I need to do work more, and maybe I need to start cutting out all the other things like my family. So I then start opting for overtime.
Another red flag.
Absolutely. Huge,
Another
isn't it?
massive red flag.
That's a massive one, you know. So
Entrenching or involving ourselves into what we know best to distract us from everything else going on around us, because that's the only place we have purpose.
absolutely. And you spoke about the noise before. I don't know if that's when we were recording or not, but I absolutely relate to that.
Yeah,
that connection.
shutting out the noise around us,
Correct.
right?
Yep. And so the only way to get rid of that fog and all that sound is if it almost felt like, you know, when I was at work, I was putting on like the noise cancelling headphones and I just cut it all out, and it was just, okay, I know who I am. I know what I'm doing. I belong here.
It's reprieve. You're actually going there for a rest.
Yeah.
You're literally trying to give your brain a rest. You don't know why, but you're just going, this is the place I need to be because I don't have to think about, we'll call it the noise.
Yeah,
right?
That's it. So I knew that something was wrong. I started to have this feeling that something was wrong because, you know, in fact, I think it was this one particular morning that I woke up. I was meant to be helping with, like Grace was in kindy at the time, meant to be helping with like some sort of, I don't know, art exhibition that they were having at the kindy. And I had meant to finish an afternoon shift, get a reasonable sleep, whatever that would look like, and then up early and to the kindy. I think I finished work at like 3 or 4 in the morning because of overtime. You know, that was common. And then so I remember sending like an email about 4 o'clock in the morning to the teacher at the kindy, say, look, I'm just getting to bed basically. So the chance of me being at the kindy in 4 hours is not, you know, it's pretty minimal. So basically took myself out of that. I woke up and Alira had gone to this thing. I remember speaking to Alira, just saying like, I've only had like a few hours of broken sleep and felt like I broke down. I just didn't know what was wrong. It just felt like I was failing at everything.
This is the morning of. So you sent that email.
Yeah, and then I woke up a little bit later and I was...
This is your breakdown moment, right?
Yeah, and I had like an emotional response to that. And I was like,
okay,
there's something not right with me. And I don't know if my brain has just fed me 2 separate stories and combined the 2 of them, but I remember those were sort of important points where I felt like I was, that I had failed in some way and that I was losing control of my life.
I can resonate here a little bit as a dad, but it's, you know, it might have just been the tipping point of letting down your child.
Yeah.
Because now you're really going, am I being a dad now?
Yeah, that's right.
You know,
and that's a really like big part of
I feel that too.
Of life. Yeah. I ended up making a time to see a doctor. I made a doctor's appointment. When I saw a doctor, he then...
And this is really important for anyone listening. If
Absolutely.
we're getting to this point, please get off to the doctor.
That's right, yeah. Please reach out to your support mechanisms.
Yeah,
you know, and a doctor is a critical one. A GP is, you know, can't understate the importance, whether we like it or not, but a GP can open up a lot of doors for you and is a really good place of like, you know, foundation for professional support seeking. If you don't have a good doctor, find one, do the work now before you need one, like in crisis, do the work now and head out and get all those other things done, you know, get blood tests and do all those things, do them regularly. You know? I'd say
that's
that.
a bit of self-care stuff.
Do those things. I went to a doctor. He then referred me to a psychologist. He asked me a few questions, and a lot of the questions that you can get on, you know, websites and stuff like Beyond Blue and other organizational websites have got resources you can just ask stuff, you know, are these things coming up? And so I went to I think there was about 6 questions in particular that he asked me, and I had answered yes to 5 out of the 6. And one of them was, have I ever been deployed to war or something like that? And I didn't say yes to that one. And I was like, oh, that's good. Like, you know, I didn't get I'm not sick because I didn't get all your questions right. And he goes, most
85%.
he says to me, most people I see will tick one of these. Some of them I see are still unwell and they might not tick any of them, but you've just ticked 5 out of 6.
Unless you're being honest too. That's so important. Right. We're going there to be honest and vulnerable, yeah?
Yeah, and this is a thing where I knew that it was still independent because I think an important point at this stage is that I knew I couldn't blur the lines, because if I was to disclose at work that I was unwell, especially if I was like mentally unwell, I believed that I would have, like, that would be a career ender. I'd be taken off the road. I'd have my gun taken away. I wouldn't be able to drive anywhere. I'd be stuck in a back office and just, you know, filing paperwork, you know.
How scary for Maddie, the motivated sense of purpose. I need to be at work.
Yeah. And 20% of the income is made up through shift work. You take me off shift work, then, you know, there's all that financial pressure as well, which is massive. And yeah, so I went to see a psychologist. He diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress and severe to extreme post-traumatic stress and depression. And I went, that's bullshit. He's like, how? Like, okay, well, what makes you say that? Basically, I'm the expert here. So who are you to decide? Yeah, that's right. But here's me, this stoic copper that's got all his shit together, supposedly. I said, well, I've never been to war, mate. So like, I'm not going to touch that PTSD label because that's on soldiers. Like, I'm not going to diminish the size of that for them. Don't give that to me.
So you're hanging off that one box you didn't tick.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's your lifeline, so to speak,
it. Yeah.
to detach from what you're being diagnosed with.
I've got this little glimmer of hope that I'm not unwell. And then I said, and I remember saying something like depressed. I mean, I don't feel anything. I don't have depression. I don't feel anything. But we also know that is obviously a big red flag.
Side of depression.
But depression.
Don't feel anything.
Yeah. Yep. And that was having a really big impact then at work, because that constant feeling of numbness was getting more and more intense, which then takes quite significant emotions to break through that. So a lot of like risk-taking behavior, a lot of like really dumb, dangerous stuff. And when you're in the police, that stuff is on offer. Like, that's on a silver platter. Like, if you want to put yourself in a difficult situation and get the fear response going, mate, go do the walkthrough of a hotel and start a fight with someone, without backup. It's easy to do, I found myself, like, when I was at work, I was almost like wanting cars, like when I'd go to stop them at 1 o'clock in the morning in some back streets, I'd want them to run. It was almost like a cat playing with a mouse, like you wanting to let it go. So
you want to let out some aggression.
Absolutely.
How do I unbottle this?
Yeah. I just knew that I needed to feel something.
Yeah, sure.
And at times it was offered, and it felt like almost this drug of like, oh, that's the hit I needed. That's good. And then I'd go back and I'd be seeking it out even more. So really dangerous place to be in. But it also coincided with a new role that I had won in the police too. So we talk about like a perfect storm, and we'll talk about the importance of, or the expertise that friends and colleagues can have in each other's lives. You change that environment and meet new people, and when that's your only circle is now people who are still trying to understand, well, what is this person's bench level? How do I know when this person is well versus how do I know when this person is unwell? That's a disconnect that can occur. So I'd won a position at the State Tactical Response Group, which was almost at the same time that I'd been to the doctor. So I had wrapped up so much, again, of my identity, even into this role. I think there was about 15 or 16 people that had gone for this one position. And I knew some of the coppers that had gone for this role. And I had been fortunate to be given this opportunity over them. And they were outstanding police officers and still are. And so for me, I was like, I've been chosen to take this position before them. Like, someone's made a mistake here, firstly, because these guys are exceptional. And then I can't let this roll down. I can't let these people down. I need to prove myself in this space, because, their options were me or 15 other like really good coppers.
So there's a bit of like low self-esteem in there, but there's also the perfectionism coming out. Yeah. So it's like, well, I don't deserve this, but now I've got it. Now I've got to excel at it.
Absolutely. And this is a common trap, especially for emergency services positions, when it's never about the individual. Never. One of the things that they do very well at the academy is they break down that sense, like almost disconnect the sense of self. That doesn't matter. The team matters. And that's really important. It's necessary for us to do some of that work that is required out there. I will always put my team first. And it's a trait that I bring forward now, but then there is also that other bit of going, well, you're only able to support your team providing you're well yourself. Yeah. And so I think that's often the bit that can be missed, is that we'll push and push at our own detriment and then potentially become a liability ourselves and go against the thing that we wanted to be. And so I found myself in this position at State Tac, loved the guys that I worked with there, and a couple of them there are still like my really good friends. And yeah, so that was a turning point. So there was no way I was telling anybody in the police that someone had said that, you've got PTSD and depression. I was not saying those words out of my mouth anywhere outside of a doctor's office. Interestingly though, and it's an important point, is that the psych told me I had symptoms of them. And the reason why it's important is because he didn't put me in a box. And in my head, I thought PTSD, depression, that's going to have me just laying on the couch, like smoking bongs, playing PlayStation, like, and maybe just watching like reruns of Cops. Like, that's what I thought it would be. But he said...
I shouldn't laugh, but yeah.
But you can picture it, can't you? You can picture it.
Yeah, I'm going to laugh now.
Yeah, but that's the point, because it's like this false sense of like, well, what is this going to be? And it's not that. And the important point around symptoms is because I can have symptoms of PTSD, and I can have symptoms of depression. I can have symptoms of a cold, and I can still live a very meaningful and purposeful life. I can still live a highly productive role in the community. I can still do lots of really big, powerful things. I just need to learn ways in which to manage those symptoms. And to be honest, lots of the symptoms kept me safe, kept me alive in the job. So why would I want to say that they're a bad thing? So a lot of the work that even I do now is about, if people say that they've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress depression, it's like, okay, do those labels serve you? It's like, well, not really. Okay, well, then don't talk about them. Let's just talk about how it shows up in your life and whether those things are serving you.
100%. I love what you just did then. You're just withdrawing that negative stigma from negative health straight up.
Absolutely.
I tell people this. I shouldn't say I suggest this. I literally tell them mental health can be a superpower.
Absolutely.
It provides another level of empathy, of understanding, of management, of utilising all these different tools that we have on offer. But what it does is it focuses on us and brings us back to this peace within us as
Absolutely.
well. And then when we feel these things arising in us, I'll use that. I can use this. I can go have a chat.